Welcome back to the Young Man Squad Fantasy Basketball Podcast. I'm your host, Noah Rubin, and it is a Tuesday, so you already know what that means. Matt Lawson is joining us, and we're going to be talking about some Dynasty Fantasy Basketball. We've been talking about the rookies the last couple times Matt's come on, but today we're just going to talk about the general Dynasty landscape. We're going to do a quick draft, go through just the top 24, the first two rounds in a standard 12-team Dynasty League. We're just going to alternate picks and see how our rankings turn out. Hopefully, two minds are better than one, and we can give you guys a good idea of how these players should be valued in your Dynasty Leagues, and we'll make our case as well. But before I bring Matt in, I just wanted to remind you guys that BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for all your sports betting action. We've got baseball season in full swing, and of course, we've got both the NHL and NBA playoffs going on. Tonight is game one of the Western Conference Finals. The Thunder are currently favored by 7 on BetOnline. And then tomorrow we'll have game one of the Knicks-Pacers Eastern Conference Finals with the Knicks favored by 4.5 currently. You can bet on individual games as well as the series on BetOnline. It's very easy to use. If you're looking to bet on a full series, the Thunder are minus 340 and the Timberwolves are currently plus 274. So if you feel passionately either way, BetOnline's a great place to get in on the action. And of course, the Knicks-Pacers series as well. Knicks are minus 159 with the Pacers at plus 139. BetOnline has the largest selection of odds on everything from the MLB to the NHL and UFC. And then in between the games, you can head over to the BetOnline casino with all the top Vegas-style games, including poker and a live casino. BetOnline, the game starts here. All right, I will make you guys wait no longer. I'm going to go ahead and bring in Matt. And we're going to go through our top 24 players. But before we do that, more importantly to me, Matt, how are you?
I am doing really well, Noah. I always look forward to these Tuesdays now. And I'm excited to talk Dynasty Startup because it comes right at the beginning and it's the most exciting part of your Dynasty League. It's so exciting that every year people are always trying to get me to do more Dynasty Startups, even people who are already in my Dynasty Leagues or who have left some Dynasty Leagues. They want to start up. And no one loves a league more than at the very beginning when there's a complete blank slate and you get to build a team. You get to be able to stake your claim on these players. This is the most, kind of intoxicating moment of all of this because it seems like there's infinite possibility to be able to build the perfect roster.
Yeah, if only there was a league format where you could just start over every single year and just have a new team instead of having to play things out. Maybe I enjoy the 5-year plan, but obviously there is redraft formats as well. Just so that everybody knows, how many leagues do you commission? If you know the number off the top of your head.
I think at this point, it's definitely over 40 Dynasty Leagues that we have at Fantasy Basketball International, where we host all of our Dynasty Leagues. I think it's definitely north of 40, probably a little bit below 50, but somewhere around there.
Yeah, so you've seen it all. You've seen all the different ways to start up a Dynasty team, because probably a lot of those are 30-team leagues as well. All the ways to draft. So we'll see how our top 24 plays out. I'm going to go ahead and bring this up on Fantrax. And if you've never seen a 2-team draft on Fantrax, this is what it looks like. This is my first time as well. So this will be interesting for both of us. I have a 2-minute timer on our picks just to keep us on track, hopefully. But I'm going to go ahead and get this started. And with the way it goes, I'm going to take the number 1 pick. And I think this one's pretty easy, Matt. I don't think you'll disagree here, but I'm going to go ahead and take Victor Wembanyama with the first pick. The fact that he's just coming off his second season, the height, the skill at his height, the defensive ability, outlier block statistics with also the rebounds. And he just still has so much more room to grow. There's probably a million different, very specific stats that show just how good he can be. I don't even need to reference them because I think this is kind of the consensus idea. If you're in a Dynasty startup this year, Victor Wembanyama should be the first player off of your board.
I totally agree. He's in a category of his own, a tier of his own in Dynasty. And I think this is a rare and probably one of the last moments with Victor where there's a little bit of a buying opportunity because of the deep vein thrombosis diagnosis from this past season. This is a condition that Brandon Ingram had. It's related to being on long flights. You can develop, this condition in shoulders and legs while you're on long flights. you're a little bit more susceptible to it as a taller person, but there's no reason to think that this isn't something that is going to be able to be managed, that where Victor is going to be back at full strength coming into this next season. And we haven't even hit his prime yet. So Victor is number one, whether you're talking about categories or points leagues. Obviously, we're doing a categories mock here, but I would take Victor number one as well. And as my time runs down here with the second pick, since this is a categories mock draft where we're thinking about a 9-cat league, I'm going to go with Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who obviously a potential MVP season. Somehow we still don't know who won the MVP, but I think Shai was a worthy candidate to win that award this year. A phenomenal season, and there's a certainty of what I know I'm getting from Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, and also an upside for growth from here, which might seem surprising to say that we think he can get better, but we saw a leap in his three-point shooting this year, which I think indicates that there's potential for even more growth going forward from this point. We know what his role will be on Oklahoma City. There's just so much that we can predict going forward across his prime, and so many prime years left. I think Shai is a great choice at number 2 here.
I agree 100%. He was a consensus top 3 player in redraft leagues this year, and he's still young. Like you said, there's still room to grow, but he's going to be very good for a very long time among the top players in category leagues, still dominant in points leagues as well. I'm going to take, with the third pick, the other player that was kind of in that consensus top 3 in redraft leagues. I would say it's more of a top 4 in dynasty leagues, but I'm going to go ahead and take Nikola Jokic, who was just eliminated by SGA in the playoffs, but the story is always just how much he's doing, how good he is, how dominant he is, and why doesn't he have more help? I don't really think it matters how Denver changes their team this year. If they just want to run it back, sure. If they want to make improvements to make this a better team around him and give themselves a better chance to win, it does not matter. Jokic is going to be one of, if not the best player in fantasy basketball once again. And I think his game is going to age fairly well, doesn't rely on a ton of athleticism. So I think even when he gets into the mid 30s, like he's still going to be very dominant. Maybe the one question mark, if you want to have like a silly question mark, is that maybe he just retires early. But that's just for the vibes. But I don't think that's anything we can project at all. I'm willing to bank on Jokic being dominant for a while.
I totally agree. And I don't buy into this narrative that just because Nikola Jokic likes to go back home and hang out with his horses, that somehow he doesn't like basketball. He is one of the best basketball players we've ever seen in the history of the game. He clearly loves the game. And I think that's one of the worst narratives in the NBA right now, that somehow Jokic doesn't care about basketball, when if anyone watches him play, he clearly does. This is going to be a really long extended prime, one of the best players in NBA history, as I said. And those players tend to last into their late 30s, as we're seeing with LeBron James, Chris Paul, those kind of first ballot Hall of Famers who can have a prime that extends well beyond what it does for a normal player. All right. There's kind of a consensus top 4 in dynasty leagues that formed last year, and I still think there's a consensus top 4. I would take Luka Doncic here at number 4, and what a strange year for Luka, but honestly, you still see what we've seen his entire career, that he is an absolutely dominant player in both real life and fantasy when he's on the court. The availability continues to be a question mark, but I do think that there's a very good chance, as we are kind of entering the true prime of Luka's career, he's just turned 26 years old back in February, we are about to enter the best years of Luka Doncic, and with two of the most maniacal workers in JJ Redick and LeBron James that we've ever seen in NBA history now in his ear, I think we could get what we want from Luka. Whereas that MVP season happens where we see the very best of him, a Luka that is focused, in better shape, and able to put on the best that he can possibly put onto the court. I think that's coming for Luka, and I'm very excited if I'm getting him in a dynasty league in the top 4.
I agree. I think that the best is yet to come for him for sure. I think maybe the lack of categorical dominance, you would maybe call it, because there is like the turnover issues or the free throw issues would make him, it's why he went 4th instead of top 3. But I definitely think that is a consensus top 4 there. I think this is kind of almost when the draft starts in a way, in the sense that there is kind of that top 4, and there's a number of different angles that you can kind of take at this point. I think I'm going to go with Tyrese Halliburton, who's a guy that maybe slipped down rankings a little bit earlier on this season. His production was kind of slow out of the gate this year, had a couple of really, really poor games that really, I guess, highlighted some struggles early on, but still ended up having one of the best seasons of his career, just continued to be a top 10 player in 9-cat leagues. The assists, the threes, the lack of turnovers, it's just plays very well in a category league, still super young, going to be one of the best point guards in the NBA for a while. Now we're seeing him in his second straight Eastern Conference Finals. No, that doesn't matter as much for our fantasy leagues, but it's just showing just how good he is as a player. And I think we'll just continue to see him grow, see his role grow, see him continue to have the ball in his hands.
Yeah, this is a point where I think there's a tier for me of around 9 players that I think you could at least consider in this tier. I have some that I think are a little higher in the tier that I like value the certainty of what they are and the upside of what they can be a little bit more. And Halliburton is certainly near the top of that. There might be limitation on what you're getting from him from a scoring perspective. He might, despite being a great free throw shooter, doesn't get to the line as much as you would want him to be able to do. Probably isn't going to lead the league in scoring at any point, but you know exactly what you're getting, which is a player who's going to be dominant in assists, really strong in 3-pointers and steals, and doesn't really hurt you anywhere other than being kind of a low rebound player. Just a great 9-category stat set and a worthy pick there. Coming back here, for me, the selection is Cade Cunningham. I love what we saw from Cade this year. And for those out there who are like, well, you can't really project rookies. You don't know what they're going to be, so you can't put them that high in dynasty rankings. Well, Cade was a guy that, I put in my rankings in the top 10 when I started even doing rankings, when Cade was coming into the league. And there was obviously a lot of pushback on that, but it was projectable, and it is projectable to be able to see what fantasy stat sets are going to look like. There are outliers who we know are going to be that kind of player. It's the same thing when we had Victor Wembanyama that high, coming in the top 3 in dynasty rankings out of the gate. Cade has fulfilled that promise, and I think there's a lot of hope for more with Cade because the 3-point shooting volume still can and will go up. His free throw percentage wobbled at the early part of this season, but he started to get to the line more and consistently make the free throws the way that he had earlier in his career. That's going to be an even more of a strength, and you're going to get near the top of the league in assists. So I love Cade going forward. I think there's even a higher ceiling than what we saw this past season.
Yeah, I agree. I've been very high on Cade since he came in. There was obviously those seasons of struggles that I think would be more the team was struggling than he was struggling individually. Had a season where he missed most of it for injury. Definitely, I was kind of between him and Halliburton there. But you wanted to talk about rookies that it's saying it's difficult to project how good they'll be. But I'm going to go ahead and take with the number 7 pick. I'm going to take Cooper Flagg. We talked about it last week. Great landing spot in Dallas for him, both or more so in the long term, because he'll get the opportunity to develop alongside future Hall of Fame players and learn from them, pick their brain, get playoff experience in year one. But he's also going to be playing a significant role in year one because he's just that good right out of the gate. We talked about the playmaking opportunities that he'll have with Kyrie Irving out to start the year. So the ball's going to be in his hands early and often. It's going to just be great for his development. Still super, super young. I think that there's a case. If you really want to lean in, if you're in your startup draft and you really want to lean into a rebuild, you can take the rookie even earlier than this. But I'm comfortable taking him here at 7.
Yeah, with Flagg, it's an extremely rare prospect, and I've tracked this going back now over a decade. You don't see a 9-category stat set where there's really no weakness in it, and this is what Cooper Flagg is bringing to the table. Prospects don't look like this from a fantasy perspective, and it is going to be truly special on the court. The Dallas landing spot is going to be great for him to be able to come in, be on a team that's competitive, where he's going to try to go out and play every single night, and he's going to be in a role that's going to help him produce. So I definitely think that Flagg is someone that you consider right around this point, where once you get past the top 4, that's where Flagg comes into consideration in a dynasty startup. All right, coming back here, the choice for me comes down to what I'm expecting going forward from a player, not only in how high their ceiling can be, but what I already know they produce. And this is availability. This is league leading scoring production. I'm going to be taking Anthony Edwards here. And we continue to see Anthony Edwards add new elements to his game. He continues to develop because he's one of the most athletic and skilled prospects we've ever seen in the NBA. I don't know what the ceiling is for Anthony Edwards, and I know there are some limitations in the fantasy stat set, but he continues to erase them. Suddenly now he's shooting 3-pointers at a volume that we've only seen from people like Klay Thompson and Steph Curry. We're seeing him score at levels that you normally wouldn't see a player achieving when he's only still 23 years old. And I think we're still going to see the peak efficiency from him come into play as he gets into his prime years, because it's hard to believe because he's been in the league for so long, but we're not there yet. We're not in Anthony Edwards' prime. We're only beginning. The playmaking is going to continue to develop. You saw that with someone like Jayson Tatum this year, where the playmaking continued to rise up. That can be a skill that develops as players get later into their 20s, later into their prime. I think the same thing will happen with Edwards. So I'm looking forward to a future with Anthony Edwards that is reaching even higher heights from a per game perspective. And you have a player who seeks to play in every single basketball game, which we know in fantasy basketball and head-to-head playoffs is vital to be able to get your top players actually on the court. That's when it matters. Anthony Edwards brings that, and that's why I would take him here.
100%. I love the pick. Availability is a great ability, especially in today's NBA, as you said, and then also just when he's on the court. Led the league in threes this year, elite scoring, steals, everything. Just the efficiency, yes, but there is time for it to get there. I'm going to take a player who was in one class later with Cade Cunningham. I'm going to take Evan Mobley, a guy that I've been pretty high on for a while. I think we would have liked to see some more of an offensive jump at this point, but we've seen him develop. I think it's more about how he is within this team, with Donovan Mitchell still being the lead scorer, still playing next to Jared Allen, still having Darius Garland with the ball in his hands as well. But we saw Evan Mobley improve as a shooter this year. We saw him win Defensive Player of the Year this year. I think the talent is too good, and it still feels like he hasn't gotten anywhere near as good as he can be. And part of that is the situation. I'm not expecting Cleveland to break this thing up, but at some point, I think Evan Mobley is going to be in a situation where he is the center and is able to showcase how much better he's gotten offensively. He's a decent passer for a player at his size. I think Evan Mobley is a great player in category leagues.
Totally agree there. I think Mobley has now leveled up in a way that we hoped for, that maybe in the first, in his third and fourth season, we were waiting for it to happen. It happened in this fourth season. He was able to transform himself into a player who can drive to the rim at will. He already leveled up in his ability to be able to finish at the rim. The passing ability, the outside shooting ability, I think those are going to continue to develop as well. So there's a ceiling even beyond what we're seeing here. I love Evan Mobley for Dynasty, and I think he's a great foundational piece. And I'm going to take a player with kind of a similar fantasy stat set, some slight differences, also 23 years old, Chet Holmgren, who is becoming a player that I think continues to answer every question we have for him. First, we wondered, could he handle the physicality of the NBA? Well, if you watch Chet Holmgren coming up in amateur levels at Gonzaga, you knew that Chet Holmgren was one of the toughest players that you'll ever see, especially for someone with the wiry frame that he has. He doesn't play small. He never has. He never will. We've seen him dominate in the rebound and block categories. He's continued. People then question, is he going to be able to play with Isaiah Hartenstein? And we've seen that work this year in Oklahoma City. Chet is going to continue to answer the bell. He's a player that I'm willing to make that foundational bet on. And he, despite a couple of injuries to be able to start his career, when he is available, he's available. And unless it's a serious injury, Chet's going to play. He's going to give you everything that he has. And he's a guy that I'm seeing as a 6-category producer in his prime, being able to help you in field goal percentage, points, threes, rebounds, blocks, and free throw percentage without hurting you in any categories and not taking anything off the table. So for 9-cat leagues and points leagues, this is a foundational top 10 dynasty asset.
Yeah, I think he's even still now trying to recover from the 3-month absence that he had earlier this season. So like he's been phenomenal, especially during this postseason, and playing at a high level, but he's still going to be even better next year. He's going to continue to grow. He's going to be healthier. He's going to have a healthy offseason. That stuff is good. I'm actually going to kind of defer from when we've been talking about players that are going to play a lot. I'm going to take a guy that has had a lot of injury question marks over the last few years in LaMelo Ball, because I think that the talent outweighs the risk with him. I think when he's on the floor, he's so freaking good that it makes up for the ankle injuries and the injury history. To me, it's worth taking him at this point. It is a frustrating thing. I think he does slip in a redraft format, but he's still young. And I think, or maybe this is more just me hoping, that he's going to be able to just stay healthier. And if that happens, then I think that vaults him up these rankings. He'd be going much earlier if he was playing closer to 60, 65 games over the past few seasons, but it's going to cause him to slip, rightfully so. But I think I'm willing to take a chance on him here.
LaMelo Ball is one of the hardest players to be able to rank in dynasty rankings and one of the hardest players to value going forward. I've moved him down a tier. So for me, he's around number 16 in my dynasty rankings. But the argument for him to be up with these players is pretty obvious. He has one of the best fantasy stat sets that you'll see. We knew he would be available, if we knew we could get him for every game, this is a player who could be in consideration for in that top 4 range, putting up numbers up there like a Luka Doncic, because the production, especially for fantasy, is outrageous when he's out there. The real question is just availability, and we saw him having to have another arthroscopic surgery on that right ankle at the end of the season. I think we're nearing a territory where I worry that this could be like a Grant Hill situation where that ankle just might not be able to continue because there's been so many procedures on it. But he did wear ankle braces this year. It did prevent him from a serious, massive injury the way we had seen in prior seasons, but it continues to be something that haunts him. All right, coming around here, this is an upside pick. This is where things get a little bit riskier, but I'm willing to take this risk because this is a player that I absolutely love. I'm going to take Amen Thompson. And it's difficult to be able to take a player where you say, well, I don't know if they can shoot. But there's a lot more of those questions as we get to this stage of the draft. What I do know is that Amen Thompson is going to play big minutes for the rest of his career, and it's going to be a very long career. And he's going to be able to produce in the way that we saw this season, where you're getting elite defensive playmaking, big rebounds, and an ability to be able to grow and assist going forward. Because we saw when Fred VanVleet was out, suddenly those numbers came way up. All of a sudden, the playmaking opportunity rose, and he rose to the occasion for it. And that's the ceiling that we haven't seen yet with Amen Thompson. I don't know if he's ever going to shoot, but he's such a good athlete, just like we saw in the prime with Russell Westbrook. That doesn't matter if you are a top 0.1% athlete in the NBA. He can still get his points, whether it's in transition, whether it's cutting, the ability to be able to get putbacks. He is going to be able to score enough that the rest of the fantasy production is going to be there. And he's a player that I'm going to be taking in the top 12 of dynasty startups for that reason.
Yeah, it's unreal how good he is at his age. You mentioned the question marks surrounding him coming out of Overtime Elite. Was like, how do we project this player? Because he looks really good, but also like, how does the competition translate? And I think he's answered every single question through his first 2 years in the league. And he's going to be very, very dominant in fantasy basketball for years and years to come. I think I'd value him, and this draft reflects that, higher than anybody else in Houston. I think Alperen Sengun would be number 2, and there's obviously a number of other talented players in that team, but Amen Thompson is the most valuable player to me. As much as I want to like stick with the fun side of things and go with younger players, I'm going to go with a player who's still very dominant, is a little older, and does have a bit of an injury history, but the past 2 seasons, most of the past, maybe a little less to the end of last season. But when he's on the floor, he's dominant, and that's Anthony Davis. He's getting older, and there are younger players here with significant upside, but I think just how good he is when he's on the floor and how important he'll be to Dallas the next year or two, to Nico Harrison for him to keep his job. He's going to need Anthony Davis on the floor and dominating. I think that, Kyrie Irving, with him being out to start next season, Cooper Flagg is still going to be young. The team is going to run through Anthony Davis, especially early on. And so I think you get multiple seasons of top 5 play out of him. And he doesn't have the same, I guess, length of a career left as some of the other guys still on the board here, but you can't guarantee that any of them are going to reach the peak that Anthony Davis is playing at right now.
And we've reached the point in the draft where we can really divert on opinions. For me, Anthony Davis has, I think, 2 prime Anthony Davis years left. At 32 years old, a big body player, the history is not good. You're taking these players do not play late into their 30s at the same level. And we've seen this over and over again, that it's very difficult, especially with his injury history, to think that there's what we think with Nikola Jokic, where there might be playing to 38, 39 years old at a high level. I don't see that for Anthony Davis. I don't see that offensive skill level for that to be able to work. And once the body gives out, the defensive ability, the ability that really keeps him on the floor, being the dominant force that he is, could start to seep away. So I would be a little bit more reluctant, but I cannot deny that he's going to be very good down the stretch of these next couple of seasons and have huge opportunity when he's available. All right, Next, I'm going to go with a player where availability is also a question, but I believe in the fantasy production and I believe the best is yet to come. I'm going to take Jaylen Johnson here. And this is where I'm a little bit higher than consensus and I'm willing to go out on a limb. The consensus dynasty rank on Jaylen Johnson has him more around number 19. I would take him higher than that. I would have him right around the top 12 of dynasty rankings. And the reason is we continue to see him every year making leaps in his game. The three-point shooting continues to tick upward and upward. And as that happens, it gets to unlock more and more of what he is able to do. Yes, you're going to get strong field goal percentage. He can score. And we saw that scoring pull up again last year. We've seen the playmaking, the ability to be able to play point forward. And we haven't even seen him in that big of a role yet without Trae Young, which is a possibility in the future that Atlanta could make that shift. And suddenly the role and the usage for Jaylen Johnson explodes upwards. And we begin to see this full fantasy stat set come into form. I'm willing to bet on that. Big steal numbers, big block numbers. Doesn't really hurt you in any places. I think that there's so much potential and ceiling with Jaylen Johnson that I'm willing to be able to make that kind of investment with him at this stage of the startup.
Yeah, he's an absolute stud. The injuries are, I guess, the lack of availability has been concerning, but it's also not. It's not like he's a repeat offender. Like LaMelo Ball, it's his ankles, but like this year it was Jaylen Johnson had two separate shoulder injuries. Like it's not like he's just injuring the same thing over and over again. It's just a bunch of random things. So hopefully it's not a trend for his entire career, but he also is an incredibly explosive athlete. He's going to spend a lot of time in the air. So some of those things are a little bit more of a risk. I think I'm going to end the slide, but I don't feel super confident about this, and I am really curious to get your thoughts, but I'm going to take Jayson Tatum here. I think he's a guy that would have gone top 10 had he not torn his Achilles. But we kind of know that he's going to miss most of next season. I think a February return, March return is realistic depending on how their season is going. And I think that he has been incredibly available for most of his career and has been very dominant for most of his career. He plays a lot. So I think had he not torn his Achilles, he would have gone top 10 in this draft. So I'm very comfortable taking him at 15 with the understanding that if you're taking Tatum in a startup draft, you're probably going to buy in on a tank year one.
I think this is the right range for Tatum, and I'll say a couple things. I don't think they should bring him back next season. I think it's possible that he tries to. We'll see what happens with that, but I would not bet on that if you are drafting Jayson Tatum in a startup this year, or if you roster him already, or you're thinking about trading for him. This is truly a play on 26, 27, and beyond. You're looking to those seasons. I do think he will come back to be Jayson Tatum. We saw it with Kevin Durant. I think Jayson Tatum has the work ethic to be able to bring his body back to exactly the same level that it was at before. I think they will take every precaution to make sure that that happens. And I believe in his work ethic to be able to be the same player and finish out his prime, have multiple years left of the same Jayson Tatum that we saw. And he's a player that I think into his mid-30s could look like Jayson Tatum the way that we saw him this past season. He is a guy who has continued to add to his game throughout his career, has improved dramatically since being a prospect at Duke. He has put in the work to be able to do that, and I think he will do it here. So I don't have concerns about that. So I would be comfortable taking him in the top 15 of a dynasty startup, and it presents an opportunity for teams to be able to use this year to be able to collect assets that are going to help them in the following season, have that tank year, get in on that really, really juicy 2026 NBA draft, and then be able to have a team that's ready to be able to contend in the 26-27 season. All right. I'm going to be taking a player that I love, that I boosted way up before this past season in my dynasty rankings. Got some pushback, but it looks like the consensus has come back to me. He's now ranked extremely highly in dynasty rankings. It's Jalen Williams for the Oklahoma City Thunder. I think we saw in Game 7 kind of the peak vision of what Jalen Williams is in the NBA. He's able to be a dominant force on both the defensive and offensive end, and I think we're just scratching the surface with his playmaking. The more opportunity he gets in that role, the more he continues to grow. I think he can be a 25-plus point a night scorer in his prime. The three-point shooting continues to tick up, and he's one of the best steal producers in the NBA. I love Jalen Williams. I think you can bet on him and know what his role is going to be going forward, even being the Robin to Shai Gilgeous-Alexander's Batman. He's still an extremely productive fantasy player who doesn't hurt you in any categories. I love Jalen Williams.
Yeah, he's been incredibly efficient throughout his career. He's had some really, I guess, elevated field goal percentage seasons for a very young player still, but kind of not a high volume player, or doesn't need to be a high volume player to have a lot of success, which is why he fits so well on this team, even as they continue to add more and more first round talent because of how loaded they are with picks over the next few years. Not really concerned because of how good he is. I'm going to add a player he's going to be 27 at the start of next season, right in his prime, entering his prime. And he has a couple categories that he's terrible in, but a couple categories that he's dominant in. And I think when you build your team properly, you can get the most out of him. But if you don't do it, you're probably not going to get the most out of him. That's Trae Young, who led the league in assists I think it was year 7 for him. And in every single season, he's improved on his assist numbers. So he's averaged a career high every single year. And do I think he's going to do that again next year? Probably not, because it's getting to the point where it's a little bit too high for that to happen. But he can hopefully improve on his efficiency. Started off this year shooting really poorly and kind of ticked that up a little bit. Still not anything where he's going to have or be relied on for that category. But I think he's going to continue to be a unique player in the sense of just how dominant his points, assists, and threes are. And he's not too bad at steals. And then also the free throws. If you build your team right, he's elite.
Yeah, Trae is, the 5 categories is going to help you in the steals. He's been able to bring into the fold as well, but points, threes, assists, and free throw percentage, he's going to be one of the top performers in those categories. You're just going to have to take the weaknesses. The field goal percentage is never going to be strong. He's not going to rebound or block shots, and you build around that stat set. So he's a good foundational piece for any dynasty team because you know exactly what you need to be able to build the rest of your category set around because you know what his weaknesses are. All right. I'm going to take another player where you have to be able to build around what they are. This is an interesting dynasty question because anytime a player creeps past 30, we begin to question, okay, how much prime is left? I'm going to take Giannis Antetokounmpo, and obviously he's going to be kind of the main character of this offseason. Is he going to get traded out of Milwaukee? I think regardless, we know what Giannis is going to bring to the table. And this year, bringing in the mid-range shot into his game gave me hope and a real vision of how his later half of his prime extends. Because if he has that ability to be able to obviously drive to the rim and be one of the biggest driving rim pressure forces in the NBA, which we already know. If he's able to match that with the threat of a mid-range game where he's able to be efficient with it the way that he was this year, you can see how he can extend the back half of his career, even as the athleticism begins to wane a little bit. No, he's not going to shoot 3-pointers, and I think that's a benefit for what we're seeing for him in fantasy now. The blocks, the steal production has come down. The block production has kind of come up and down at different times. But I believe that when you're getting elite field goal percentage, points, rebounds from Giannis, the assist totals, the fantasy stat set is there for him to be a top 20 dynasty asset going forward, because I think you still are going to have 4 or 5 years of Giannis being a prime fantasy player ahead of you because he's just that good. This is a top 5 MVP candidate every season, year in and year out, and I believe in him going forward.
100%. I think whether he ends up asking out of Milwaukee, which is what I think most of us are kind of prepping for, or stays there, he's just going to be dominant. Like, you don't trade for Giannis to have him be the number 2 option on a team. You trade him to get him the ball and watch him go to work, and then you build the team around him. Like, no, he's not going to, free throws are going to be terrible. He's not going to hit threes. The turnovers are going to be there. But like you said, everything else that he does at just such a high level, such a dominant level. He is similar to Trae Young, just different categories in the sense that you build the team around him properly, and you're going to maximize what he does, and it's going to be incredible. I'm going to take another player with actually kind of similar deficiencies to Giannis in the free throw sense, in the turnover sense. I'm going to take Alperen Şengün. Doesn't hit a ton of threes, but a decent shooter. Not a great free throw shooter, but especially at the center position, the rebounds and assists are valuable. Really good pass for a big. They call him Baby Jokic for a reason. Shoots a high field goal percentage, can score at a high level. I don't think we've seen him reach his potential either. A lot of room for him to grow. Very excited about him moving forward. It'll be interesting to see how Houston builds out their team, if they just continue to build around Amen Thompson or Alperen Şengün, or if they end up using one of them or somebody else in a trade to bring in a high-level superstar, which I'd be more willing to move Şengün than Amen Thompson. But I still think no matter where he is, he's going to be very dominant.
With Şengün, I think everyone kind of worried about whether, can he fit into a real defense? Well, we now have 2 straight seasons of him fitting into a top 10 NBA defense, and he's changed himself dramatically as a defensive player. I think he maps the court way better on the defensive end than he did in the first couple seasons, and that question has been answered. We saw him put up a season this year, which I actually think underplays what he actually can be in the NBA. Houston doesn't run the ball the way through him the way that you see Jokic or even Domantas Sabonis get the ball run through them. I think there could be more of that in his future, especially if he's traded out of Houston. If he goes out in, say, a Giannis trade, if he went to Milwaukee, suddenly you see everything going through him, and that's where the real fantasy ceiling is here, where he could reach new heights. All right, I'm going to take a player, another 23-year-old. There's so many guys who are right around this age who are in this conversation, who has become a consensus top 20 dynasty asset. A little bit of a strange season this year, but I believe in what the future is going to look like. That's Scotty Barnes. So Barnes this year, the three-point shooting completely failed him. And I think we've seen that kind of come and go at different points in his career. He does need to find consistency there. But what we do have is one of the better off-ball defensive players and playmakers in the league. He's really great in that role of kind of getting to play center field and create disruptive events. And that's caused both of the steal and block rates to jump up. The assist rate is going to be strong. He gets rebounds. He's able to score at a decent level. And it's a fantasy stat set that, again, like so many of the players we're discussing, doesn't really hurt you in any given area. So if the three-point shooting comes, then there's consistent first-round fantasy production in the future for Scotty Barnes. If it doesn't, I still think he's a really valuable player who's going to be a big minute starter and be able to put up really nice fantasy stats across a prime that hasn't even started yet. I love Scotty Barnes as a top 20 dynasty asset.
Yeah, I think it was kind of a lost season for both him and Toronto. Like, he's still Scotty Barnes, but he definitely wasn't the same player that he was the year before. And I think at this time last year, he was going earlier in draft. So you're almost kind of getting him at lower value, getting him at 20, because the talent there is still, it fits really well for a category league, and kind of buying low on him here. Love the pick. I'm going to go with a different big who's actually more of a center, who kind of had a career resurgence this year. That's Karl-Anthony Towns. He had the last 2 years in Minnesota with Rudy Gobert, where his value kind of ticked down. And I think it kind of resulted in his dynasty value ticking down as well. Then he gets traded to New York, and everybody says, oh, now he's a center again. Yeah, this is going to be really good for fantasy. He's going to get rebounds. He's going to block some more shots. He's going to be important on the offensive end, which I think we've kind of not seen that to the extent that maybe he should be used on the offensive end, especially in the postseason. But just him being a center instead of a power forward has vaulted him back into fantasy dominance. He'll be 30 early next season, which isn't great, but I still think he's too good to let slip past this.
I totally agree. And I think Karl-Anthony Towns is a nice reminder that sometimes change of scenery, we need to keep in the back of our head what a player did in a role previously, because this was who Karl-Anthony Towns was before Rudy Gobert came to Minnesota. He had this kind of fantasy stat set to be a potential first round fantasy producer. And we saw it again once he got to be able to play that kind of role in New York this season. So always file that away. Sometimes we kind of give up on players because they shift into different roles on different teams, or even on their same team when someone comes in. But it's still there, and it can shift back into place if they get put back into that role. All right. Here, I think there's a little bit of a tier shift that's occurring around this point, but there definitely are a lot of players that I still believe not only in their floor, their foundation for what they are, and also what they can be. I'm going to take Franz Wagner here. And this has been a player that I think has been always been a little bit controversial for people, because a lot of people didn't like him in the draft because they thought he was a role player. They didn't see what he could actually become in the NBA, which if you watched him, you understood that he was playing a role at Michigan, but there was more to what he could be. And he showed that in the NBA, being able to drive to the rim. He's one of the best drivers, one of the best rim pressure wings in the NBA, a really great facilitator with the ball, makes smart decisions with it. And when he got an extended run with Paolo Banchero out this year, we kind of saw the flash of the full vision of what Franz Wagner could be. Now, understandably, the three-point shooting only 29% this year, struggled within the playoffs as well. That's been kind of the swing skill for him. But the encouraging thing is, not only is he one of the best free throw shooters in the NBA, but you're also seeing the three-point volume tick up every single year. We're now up to 93rd percent volume. And when guys are willing to continue to shoot at that level, that is the best indicator of future success. It's not necessarily what the three-point percentage is, because a good couple weeks shooting from three can vastly swing your three-point percentage. But if a guy has the confidence to be able to continue to shoot and the role to be able to continue to shoot at high volume, it's coming. And I think it is coming with Franz Wagner. The best seasons are still to come with him. And I think think that if you're getting him in the top 25 of a dynasty startup, you're going to have a player that is going to be a foundation, a bedrock of your roster for another decade to come.
Yeah, you were just talking about with Karl Anthony Towns, remembering what a player was like in a situation, so that when we see that situation later on, we know what that's going to look like. We saw Franz in a small sample size what he looked like without Paolo. And so if he gets ever into that role, then we can see what maybe he can become that superstar level player. My fear is that Orlando is going to be so happy having these two 6'10" elite forwards that also play make that they're never going to take them apart. And he could still be playing at a super high level and be worthy of this pick, but it may not maximize what we could see if he was playing on his own. So we'll see how things play out. I'm going to go ahead and take Jaren Jackson Jr. with my final pick here. I think the main thing that sticks out as a negative is the lack of rebounding, but he makes up for it by being very dynamic in a number of other categories. Helps him fit in with certain team builds, because maybe if you're looking at a punt rebounds build, but you can still get him to get your block shots, you can get steals, you can get threes. He does a lot of unique things from that spot. I think that he's the most valuable player in Memphis right now. The question is, can he get back to being a 2.5 to 3 shot block per game type of player? Hopefully, but if not, I think that he still is able to do a number of things across the board to make him worth this pick.
All right. I'm going to finish things out here with a player that I think disappointed in real life because they didn't step up into the kind of vacuum of opportunity that was created by their team's disaster season, but a player that I think did show some things that's going to mean that their prime for fantasy is going to look even better than we anticipated. That's Tyrese Maxey. This year, in a Nick Nurse defense, he was able to kind of do what we saw with the Toronto Raptors Nick Nurse teams, where those steal rates jumped way up. All of a sudden, players like Gary Trent Jr. have like massive steal rates. We saw Maxey do that this season.
Mm-hmm.
The steal rate goes way up, and he's able to add that to his fantasy stat set. So this is a player who can be a true matchup winner in points, threes, steals, free throw percentage, make some solid contributions and assists as well. And then otherwise, it's kind of your prototypical guard stat set where he's a little weaker in field goal percentage, rebounds, and blocks, but you know exactly the puzzle pieces of big men to be able to fit in to your roster to be able to make up for those deficiencies. So I love Maxey going forward. He continues to add things to his game. I mean, he's made himself into one of the best shooters in the NBA after being not a particularly strong shooter in his one season in college. I think that at only 24 years old, there's an incredible prime ahead for him, and I'd be looking to add him to my dynasty team as a foundational piece.
Yeah, I think how good Maxey has been the past year or two, but really like he had the phenomenal stretch this season. It makes, if you're in charge in Philadelphia, if you're Daryl Morey, you have to almost consider like you have the number 3 pick, you have Tyrese Maxey, you have Jared McKay, Quentin Grimes coming off a really good season. You also have Joel Embiid and Paul George. Like, what does your timeline look like? Are you still trying to maximize this thing with Joel Embiid, or has Maxey been good enough that you almost say like, ooh, we have all these young guys, we have this top pick. Let's see what else we can get for Paul George and Joel Embiid, and almost hit a mini reset button, because if we do that, we can compete again really quickly. So I think he's been that good that you do have to at least ask that question. This is our top 24. Matt, if you just want to quickly highlight, if you had anybody else left on your board that you would have taken the next couple picks, you don't have to go in depth, but
Yeah, the next couple guys for me, first, Paulo Banchero. I understand that there's deficiencies in the fantasy stat set, but I think he reminded us all in the playoffs yet again of what the ceiling is with him. And when the player continues to be able to flash that kind of brilliance, I think we need to take notice, especially against high-level competition. No, Paulo is not at a point yet where the three-point shot is consistent, but we've seen continued growth in that area. And I think that his playmaking, kind of like that we've talked about with the Jayson Tatum, with some of the other players who kind of grow in an on-ball role throughout the NBA, he's eventually going to be a big assist producer as well. And you're going to get elite scoring, strong rebounding. And I think that the free throw shooting is going to be able to level out where it's going to be a negative, but not going to be sinking your entire category at a certain point with him as well, because he does have a good degree of touch. So Paulo is someone that I believe in. I think I would take Franz first, just like I did here, but it's close. And I really do like Paulo's future in the NBA from that perspective. For the other player for me, and this is higher than consensus, I love Trey Murphy III. I love the growth that we saw from him this year. He continues to be able to scale up his production into opportunity. Whenever he gets a big usage stretch, he scales up and the efficiency scales up with it. And that's a great indicator that this is a player who can be a star level scorer in the NBA. We saw him be able to create more offense for himself this year, created in transition, created in the half court at a higher level than he had before, and he remains one of the better shooters in the NBA as well. I think he's kind of one of the few pieces that you can really trust in New Orleans going forward, and he's going to be available. He's going to play. I think he's going to continue to play at a high level. I love Trey Murphy, and I think he's a player that maybe some consider more a top 40-ish dynasty asset. I'd have him more in that top 25 range.
Yeah, the 4 players I still had in my queue were Trey Murphy, Devin Booker, Donovan Mitchell, and Darius Garland. Still love Garland's upside. Obviously, we know how good Donovan Mitchell and Devin Booker are right now. And that's kind of the way things have played out here. But this is our board for our top 24. We'll post this and get this episode out as quickly as possible. As always, it's a Tuesday, Matt. Thank you for taking the time to join me for this.
Thanks for having me, Noah.
Absolutely. And so that's going to do it for this episode of the Young Man Squad Fantasy Basketball Podcast. You can give Matt a follow on Twitter at NBA Dynasty ADP. You can follow me as well if you want at NoRuben22. Like, subscribe, comment, all that fun stuff. But that's going to do it, and we will see you next time.